My people, what is good? And yeah, you see the title of the video, we're going to be talking about Job today. And just as a forewarning, this channel is going to be very, very random with its content, but also very intentional with this content because this is actually not planned by me. Maybe it was by God, but my two recent videos were about my own unfortunate situation. Well, fortunate in my opinion, but with from the outside view, a bad situation with my job where I got laid off, right? And you guys don't know this, but when I write video ideas down, I just kind of brainstorm stuff, and if I get a good idea, I write it down, right? And so I organize my video ideas to come record them, and so those two are back to back, and I didn't even realize that this third video is actually the one that came to my mind for me to record in this order, and I think it's just such perfect timing for me to talk about Job after me going through a external situation. And a lot of people in my past have asked me how I stay calm, not just with this, but in certain things in general. And I hope with this video I can shed some light on that and about how understanding more about God and the Bible and your relationship with God can help you keep calm and hopefully in all, but a lot of situations. Okay, so with Job, I think the first place that I want to start off here is that first point that I want to make, your external situations are not a reflection of your relationship with God. And that's really highlighted in Job. And I think that a lot of times with us, and I'll link a podcast below that I listen to a lot called 40 Minutes in the Old Testament, and they go into a lot of detail on this, but we get it confused as people where we think, oh, something that we're experiencing or is happening to us must be because of something that we've done in the past, right? So let's say I'll use an example. I get fired from my job. It must be because I did X sin, I cheated, and now God is punishing me for what I've done. Or if I do something good, or something good happens to me, wow, I am getting blessed. This is because I did something good, and now I put it into the God vending machine, and now something good is happening to me. And I think one of the biggest lessons that we can learn from Job, and really from the entire Bible, that this could not be the further from the truth, right? And so, at the beginning of Job, for those who aren't familiar with the story, and I was just reading it real quick to prepare for this. Basically, Job is that dude on earth, right? Like, he's that guy. He's got the respect of everybody, wife, kids, good job. I guess he's a huge farmer or whatever, but he's loaded, right? And they kind of show you, in the Bible, it shows Job's, I'm pretty sure it just talks about Job, his external ranks. Yep, yeah. He was blameless and upright. He feared and shunned evil. He had 7 sons, thousands of sheep, whatever. He was loaded, right? So the first chapter, they talk about Job, he's loaded, right? Intro to Job. And then in the second chapter, it's very interesting because they go behind the veil of life, right? And they show these angels presenting themselves to God, and they show Satan as well. And then basically he just says that he was roaming around the earth, and then God basically almost interestingly, confidently offers up Job to be a topic of discussion. And then Satan basically replies like, hey, if you take everything away from him, he'll curse you. And God's like, he lets it happen. Lets it happen to Job, right? And so Job obviously starts experiencing these terrible things, like so many, I believe all of his wife and all of his kids die, he gets sores and all this nature. But I'm gonna just take a time out in the story, because I think this just goes to highlight that we do not know what's happening behind the veil or what's happening in the spiritual side of things. We just aren't privy to. So there's no possible way to deduce what's happening in your reality based on, oh, this must be because I'm righteous or I'm not this or I'm not that. It's just not there, right? Because, but the thing is, us as humans, we are wired to think that way. So that's chapter 1 and 2 of Job, but I just laid out. Basically almost the entire middle part of the book from what I remember and what I just looked over, is basically Job and his friends going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth on like, Job, what happened? What did you do? Your ancestors must have done something. You must have done something for you to be cursed like this, because Job is afflicted. He's lost all his wealth, his wife, his money, his kids, all gone, all just gone out of nowhere. And then they're just like, hey, like obviously, this is, you must have done something, Job. Like, just give it up. Like, give up the act. Stop trying to act like you didn't do anything. Obviously, God has cursed you because you've done something, right? Because from our external, just looking at the physical world, that is what you would think, is that your external situation matches something that you've done. But then, Job is just like, guys, just shut the hell up. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do anything. He's just like, stop it, right? And then, there's one point that I want to highlight here too, where I forget the verse. I didn't look it up, but one of Job's friends are just like, hey, like, don't you know that the wicked get punished for wicked, and they don't prosper, and the righteous, they get, they prosper. Don't you see that, right? And then he's just like, and then Job just like, what are you talking about? It's just like, that's not true. Have you opened your eyes? Like, the wicked are prospering all the time, and people who do good get the shaft all the time. And so he's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, again, Job had a reputation for being a good dude. So he's like, hey, this whole system of life better not work on good deeds and bad deeds, because if it was, then y'all will be fucked. Basically is what Job says, right? And yeah, I think you can bring that up to just our current world now, dude. Is like, so many people who are rich or powerful, have money, like, it's kind of goes to show, even outside of just the Bible, like, if you just kind of really open your eyes and think about it, it does make absolutely no sense if you were to try and sit there and think that your deeds would translate to a good future, like just in and of themselves, right? Because it actually isn't true at all. Like, you see just like guys like Trump, Elon, these pretty much horrible people who are have huge financial wealth. In my experience, I've met people who are very wealthy and well off who are just terrible people, right? And then people who don't have much, but who are usually, like, on a moral scale, most people would say are more upright and honest. And so that's just something you kind of see. But then we always assume that our good deeds will lead to good things and our bad deeds will lead to bad things, when it isn't the truth. It isn't the case, right? And so what we often do is we often, complain to God. We say, hey, God, what the heck, right? What's going on? Where are you? Right? And that's what we totally look like. We're just like, God, like, what's going on? What's happening? Why is this, happening to me? Like, something bad happens. It's like, yo, God, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you, messing with me, right? That's how it feels. And I get it. Like I said, trust me, I've done this more times than, I can count. So I'm not saying that I never do this. I've done this before. I still do it to this day. It's hard to not do it, but once you, like, kind of get this concept in your head, then it'll be easier to think about. So this book in Job, how it ends, right? So again, I set the stage. Job. Just gonna turn to it at the end real quick. Excuse me. You hear me there? Okay, right. So it goes for 37 chapters, or 35, just chapters that Job and his guys going back and forth, and then at the end, after all this, it says the Lord speaks. And so the Lord came to Jacob out of the storm, right? And then he says, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man, and I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid down the earth's foundation? Who marked off this? Where were you when I, shut up the sea behind the doors, or burst it forth from the womb? So basically, God shows up at the end of this. So basically, another point that I want to get into that is important to hopefully reorient your mind to what you're doing when you're questioning why things are happening to you, is you need to remember that you are not God, and that's a good thing. That is a very, very good thing, and that it is extremely out of order for us as humans to question God. It is. To be like, God, why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And we all do it. The thing is, we all do it. I do it. But it it just doesn't make any sense when you really sit there and think about it. And that's kind of where God comes in and almost just like, I don't want to say flexes, but he does kind of like come in and say like, hey, are you really going to question me? Were you there when I like put the sun in the sky? Were you there when I measured the earth and then marked it up? Like, if you do believe in God and you do believe God is all powerful and all knowing, if you really logically think about it, it makes absolute zero sense for us to be like, oh God, why didn't I get this promotion at work? And it's just like, when you really reorient yourself back to that position of like, yo, like I am not as smart as God. Like his ways are not my ways. Like I'm not in position to ask that question. Right? And so but I'll continue on with the chapter, right? I'm continuing on with it. And then he goes and he's just, asking Job a lot of these questions. And I forget how it ends. Maybe I should have turned that and looked at it too. But he really just goes off on Job. And again, the Job was a righteous guy. He goes off on him. And then he, almost tells him, like, he says, brace yourself like a man, right? And then Job, in the presence of the Lord, basically just says, like, I know you can do all these things. He asked, who is this? Who obscures my knowledge? And then Job is like, surely I spoke of things I didn't understand. And then he said, I'll listen to you when you speak, like, I repent, And so afterwards, God tells Job to pray for himself and his two friends. And then basically in the story, God restores Job to everything that he had and twice as more. And so that's the end of the story. And that kind of leads us to say, like, so, what does that all mean? What on earth does any of this mean? And how on earth is any of this supposed to give me any comfort, right? And the comfort that I take away from it is the fact that your future is in the hands of God. It's in the hands of someone who loves you and cares for you. And it's not in your own hands, but that's a good thing, because if it was, like, we would mess it up, guys. Like, we are not, what I'm saying? If you guys are anything like me, you guys have certainly messed stuff up all the time. You guys are inconsistent. You've whatever. Just you're human. Like we make mistakes, dude. But it's like we have to let God control the things that God is in control of. That's what I think of as that, and I think we need to kind of reorient ourselves to remember that, like, we are still like humans at the end of the day, right? And we can't ultimately, what I'm saying, we don't have that much control. We don't have as much control as we think we have, I think, is my ultimate takeaway. And that's a good thing. And like, you need to really just focus on the things that God has laid out for you, in his word. And, again, this is just only one aspect of the Bible. There's other parts, I'll go over more on parts of the channel. But I think once you really like sit there and accept that your external circumstances aren't a result of all your choices, then you'll I think there's a level of peace that comes with that. I think there's a level of acceptance that comes with that. And I think there's a level of, that's how God kind of wants your posture to be. And I think there's a level of humbleness that comes with it. Because I think I think that a bigger thing to realize too is when you're doing that, and again, we all do it, but when you're doing that, you really are taking a lot of pride from yourself and thinking that the way that, in my view, in my perspective, this is how I think reality should be. This is how I think the earth should be. Or this is how I think life should be. When it's like, realistically, I think that's the whole point of Job, where it's just like, when you're sitting there questioning God, I'm not saying that, life's going to get tough, life's going to get horrible, life's going to get saddening, depressing. I know it does. Like, I know there's horrible, dark times, and that also talked about in the Bible. But I think this part of it, just kind of, this part of the Bible, at least my takeaway, is I think that it really does remind us that we need to let go a lot of times. We need to let go, and we need to understand that, there's somebody else who loves us, who actually has an actual divine plan for our lives, and he's the one orchestrating things behind the veil for our good, right? So, I think there's just so many other millions of things that we don't see, and I think that's where a lot of our stress comes from at the end of the day. And, like, I was in this self-improvement a lot, and I still am, like, but it's just realizing that you can't, like, hustle culture your way out of everything. You can't, like, grind your way out of everything. Like, some things you just gotta sit with, and you gotta let it be with, and I think that's definitely been helping me a lot. going through this tough situation. But I think it's also it's a very, let's say for me, it's very relieving to know that I can sit back and let go because it's not all on me. I think that's the point of Job. It's not all on you, because if it was, we would mess it up. Like, we are humans. We make mistakes. Like, we sin. We turn away from God. We do all types of bad stuff. I mean, just look at the world. You see, we do all types of messed up stuff. So if everything we did was up to us, it would be messed up, right? And so I think that's one of the biggest points of Job, where it's like, it's not all on you to begin with. So for you to end up questioning it really doesn't make any sense, because you're not even involved as you think you are. And that's my thing. I think that's where God is coming at the end, is saying like, hey, Joe, you're talking about this, your family. Like, dude, do you know what the ground, I made the literal ground that you're standing on I made these sheeps, all right? Like, you don't know how deep this goes, all right? So just relax, and I got you. And the thing was, like, you know, I think goes to show that God knew from the jump that Job wouldn't fold. You know, he said that from the beginning with his conversation with, Satan the devil, that he knew that Job wouldn't fold, but he still allowed this all to happen to him. And I think it also goes to show that God ultimately isn't interested in our greatest, accomplishment being having a bunch of stuff on earth, right? I think he's more interested in us, our development as a person, and our faith in him and our relationship with him. Because after this, you see Job has a much more deepened relationship with God. He sees God face to face, and he's obviously a better man after this whole process, and his story is recorded for all future generations. So it's like, but in the moment it was like, all he could think about was his wife, his kids, and money. But it's like there's a whole bigger, grander thing at play, and I think that's could be with us a lot of times. Where it's like we're only thinking about this week or this day or this year, but I think God is more interested in us as a person, as gearing ourselves into a relationship with him, so that we can take that, and that can be what we really focus on and lean on. Because a lot of times we lean on these things that we have in life, like our job, our money, our career, our relationships, but these things can be gone in the blink of a moment. And if they are, like, are you still there? Are you able to tap in with God and realize who you are and where you come from? And then I think sometimes those things need to be taken away from us, so that we can realize like who we are, and that we're not a job, we're not a relationship, we're not money. These things, we can have them, but they're not us. They shouldn't be where we place our faith, our life, our values. And that's just the wisdom of Job. And just to synchronize it, I'll just summarize by saying that your external situation is not a reflection of you as a person, and that's a good thing. That's a peaceful thing, because you should rely on God to lead you to where you need to be, and you shouldn't take it all the pressure of your life on yourself, because it isn't on you. And that's a good thing, because if it was, you'd probably mess it up. So let go, and let God take control of these things. So that's my take on the wisdom of Job. Just a quick little thought that I wanted to get out there. So I'll definitely be doing a mix of different things on this channel. I might record some spiritual talk videos like this. But just something that helped me a lot, and I wanted to share with you guys. So I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.